Hello and welcome to the World Wanderers podcast, a proud part of the Wander Barn Podcast Network.
I'm Ryan.
I'm Amanda.
And we're your hosts.
We're a traveling couple and digital nomads taking you on our adventures as we explore locations, destinations, and careers.
Enjoy the show. Hello and welcome to the World Wanderers podcast and happy 2024.
Yeah, we're excited to be back. Another year of podcasting, another year of adventures, but kicking things off in 2024 with a couple of episodes talking about our last adventure of 2023, which we were having so much fun adventuring that we never talked about on the show. We kind of took an unintentional late fall break before wrapping up the year.
Yeah, which was Argentina. So if you follow us on social media, you'll have seen some nice, pretty landscape photos from Argentina. But we were there in November 2023. Second time ever going to Argentina and our second time in South America in 2023.
Yeah. If you guys listened to our 2023 year in review episode, then you know we kicked off the year in Panama, which is Central America, and then Colombia. We spent a couple of weeks in Medellin in Colombia. And if you guys have been longtime listeners of this show, well, first of all, thanks for being here. But if you're not, then a little bit of our, travel history is that in 2014, we took a big backpacking trip through South America, and we spent a while in Argentina. When we went there, we ended up doing language school in Buenos Aires. We spent about 2 weeks there doing a homestay, which was like the longest we stayed anywhere, I think, in the entire 6 months of our travel. So that was like pretty significant for us.
Yeah, and I remember from that time too, when we started that trip, when you're traveling place to place, staying in hostels, you're having a ton of conversations about the type of stuff that was good, your favorite places. And then we were like, Colombia. And then when we got to Argentina, it became Colombia and Argentina. So like by the end of the trip, whenever anyone would ask like, oh, what were your favorite places? Favorite countries, Colombia and Argentina were our favorite ones. So I think from that time, we always wanted to go back, but it's very far away.
It is far away. And I think it's just like, you fast forward through so much of what we've done. And it's like we've done so much exploring of Asia. And then we spent so much time in Mexico and kind of Central America. And I don't know, I guess maybe it's just the distance that's kept us away all these years, but we just haven't gotten back there. And so it was really fun to go back to Argentina in a very different chapter of life. Like we said before, 2014, I turned 25 on that trip. So we're just like little backpacking babies at that point. And, on a backpacker's budget. And from Buenos Aires, we flew to Ushuaia, and then we actually bussed all the way to Lima. That was over the course of like 3-ish months. So not a quick period of time, but we did a lot of jumping through through Chile and through Argentina to go all the way kind of up that coast. And one of the places that we went to for, what did we figure out? We were there for like 2-3 nights, just like a quick trip.
I think we did 2 nights there. I think we got there like in a morning, perhaps, and stayed a day, a night, a full day, a night, and then left.
Yeah, that sounds about right. Was Bariloche. And Bariloche, for those of you who aren't familiar, is in the Lake District part of Patagonia. So it's a bit northern part of Patagonia. It's so crazy when you start looking on a map because Argentina and Chile are just like so long. They just go so far south and then also like quite a bit north. So Bariloche is kind of like in the middle of Argentina, but on the Chilean border. It's, got the Andes Mountains, but also a ton of lakes. And this was an area like we said, we went for just a couple of nights, but we really fell in love with it. I feel like we were like, we have to come back. We have to spend more time here. And so finally, 2023 was the year. And maybe let's talk a little bit about why Argentina for our last trip. We were just doing some reflections on 2023 and goals. And this isn't a new country for us. And we haven't been to a new country for a while now. And I think we're at this sort of strange point where there's so many places that we haven't been for so long that we're going back in this new chapter of life. So it feels new in a lot of ways, but it's not, not new technically. And so maybe we can talk about, because this idea started blossoming, I guess, in maybe June.
Yeah, I don't remember exactly when it was, but I think for both of us, we were kind of, after being so much time in Mexico, kind of craving a change of pace and maybe something that was like a little bit different than like the stuff we'd had experienced in the past couple of years. Especially like time in nature, I think was a big idea. And then we'd also been seeing a whole bunch of friends in Argentina over the past 2 years. And that was definitely creating some ganas to go eat steak and drink wine and explore.
Yeah. And it's also, I mean, things have changed. Things changed while we were in Argentina. There was actually an election while we were there, and the government has gone through a pretty significant change. You know, since then, there's a new president in office who's making some big changes to the country. But, you know, prior to this change, and I think even now, it's a very interesting time in Argentina's history to go. But I feel like we went at a really unique time. And I think we had, like you said, so many friends go probably maybe end of 2022 through the beginning of 2023. And, you know, of course, Argentina is a beautiful country in so many ways, and they have an amazing culture. They speak Spanish, which is great for us. They have amazing food, which we will obviously talk about. But also, they were going through this extreme inflation with their currency, which we experienced on a very, very, very small scale when we were there in 2014. Like kind of, I think, the start of this change your money, USD on the street and get a better rate. And then it just kind of has blown up over the last decade. And so it's a really advantageous time if you can enter the country with US dollars and change to make your dollars go a long way. Now, I'm not saying that this is necessarily a good thing in general. I think that, you know, obviously the people who live there and the nationals, you know, deserve to have a good life. But as a foreigner, very, very interesting time to go and visit. And we were kind of like, maybe we should go. We could go eat and drink for very little amounts of money. We just saw friends, $2 steaks and $1 glass of wine, and nicest restaurant in Buenos Aires, and I spent $30. And you're like, what? We could save money by going to Argentina? That's kind of absurd since we do live in Mexico.
Yeah. The kind of like super short version is due to a whole bunch of import and export restrictions, some price fixing on certain things, and then during the pandemic, especially just like really intense money printing. The value of the currency has gone down a ton. And just if you have US dollars, it's become more and more affordable. I remember when we were there, I was trying to think back to 2014 because Argentina definitely wasn't cheap. I remember coming from Brazil and feeling like, this stuff here is better and it's more affordable than it was in Brazil.
I think it was more affordable than Uruguay, which is where we came from before that. But no, it wasn't. I mean, compared to being in like Colombia, Ecuador, and I think we followed Chile and Argentina with Bolivia, which was significantly cheaper at the time. I'm not sure now. I think it was kind of in the middle.
Yeah. And so, but yeah, prices have definitely made it attractive. I think too, just like we love where we're at in Mexico, but lakes and mountains and hiking is stuff we like as well, that we really like. And we haven't had as much. And even like when we're back in Canada now, because we're doing so much visiting with family and then balancing that with working, we haven't really had the time to get out and enjoy it. And the other thing with Canada too is kind of at the start of our nomad journey, we'd spend like 4 months in the mountains in the summer. The last couple of times going back for a few weeks, the prices in Canada have gone insane. So when you're looking at, hey, we're going to go spend a night or a couple nights in the mountains, it's kind of like, well, we'd rather just like do an entire trip to Argentina than book like a 3-night hotel stay in Banff.
Yeah, no, absolutely. It's just really become kind of crazy. And so, yeah, those are kind of our intentions around that. And so we decided to look into it a little bit more and do a little bit more research. And I think we were both a little bit back and forth on it. And I think the thought process was, we've already traveled a lot this year. Is it a responsible use of our money and our time to do another big trip this year? And then we kind of thought, okay, if we don't do it in the fall, when are we going to do it? And it was going to fall after Lou's second birthday, which will happen in February. We weren't going to be able to go like in January because we already have some travel plans in January. And so we were kind of like, well, why don't we go now? Because for those of you who don't have kids or don't have friends with kids, you have to pay for their own seat once they turn 2. So it was pretty advantageous for us to go in November when we could still have her on our lap and just pay for 2 seats. And so that was a kind of a motivating factor for the time. So we started doing a bit more research. November is spring in Argentina. So the weather looked pretty good when we did our research. It wasn't supposed to be like super, super warm in Bariloche, but it was supposed to be pretty like moderate spring temperatures. And then we were planning to head to Buenos Aires for Thanksgiving, American Thanksgiving, and the temperatures were looking great for that. So we were like, okay, let's do it. So start looking into flights.
Well, and I think so the other thing, Nathan from Foodie Flashbacker, who's a good friend, was planning to be there. And I think even before we were like, oh, we want to go to Argentina, we were kind of like, would it be cool to go to Bariloche? And then we like found some like really nice looking Airbnbs and we're like, okay, we want to go to Bariloche.
Yeah, that's true. Yeah. I messaged Nathan, was like, I knew Argentina was a possibility for him in the fall and said, what's the chances you'll be there? And he was like, I'm leaning towards that. And I was like, okay, would you come to Bariloche to visit? And he was like, yeah, absolutely. And I was like, okay, that's a pro. And then, we started doing like flight research, Airbnb research. We found a couple Airbnbs that we really liked that seemed like this would be just great for the type of trip we're looking for. And then when we actually started diving into flights, we discovered that it was significantly cheaper to fly to Santiago in Chile than it was to fly to Buenos Aires. And if you look on a map, that actually makes sense to go to Bariloche. So we're like, cool, yeah, let's do that. Let's book that. So we booked our return flights in and out of Querétaro through Mexico City and then onwards to Santiago. What ended up happening, which was not super ideal for us, is at the time of looking, there was a direct flight from Santiago to Bariloche, super affordable. So we were going to do that and obviously fly to Buenos Aires and then back to Santiago. And then when it actually came to booking that, we discovered that November is like the only month that they don't run that flight pass. So then we were a little bit like, okay, we either have to like take a flight and take a bus, or we need to fly to Buenos Aires and then back to Bariloche, which on a map really doesn't make a lot of sense. But that was the most like economical thing and made the most sense with traveling with an infant. So we ended up doing that. So maybe we can talk a little bit about our like long haul flight with a toddler before we get into like actually being in Santiago and all of that.
Yeah. And just one really quick thing for anyone who's thinking about going to Argentina, going to Santiago can be a good move. It might change though, because what happens is into and out of Buenos Aires, there are tons of taxes and fees. And so we were looking at flights that were like 30-40% cheaper to go to Santiago. So worth keeping an eye on, but definitely it's worth something considering because the flight's there's lots of options and pretty cheap in between. If you want to go there, I know Sao Paulo is another option, but it can be worth getting to South America and then getting your flight to Argentina. But it does seem like that's one of the things that might change with the new government. Yeah,
for sure. I think just doing some research, and I know over, I guess the last year we've had, like we said, so many friends going, and a lot of them found really, really good flight deals, to and from Buenos Aires. So it's not that it's not possible. It was just in the time we were booking, going to and from Mexico City was just not affordable. But once we started doing, it's not that it wasn't affordable, I guess. It was just much more expensive. And so we were like, well, we can save a bunch of money by just flying to Santiago. So why don't we just do that? And so that's what we ended up doing. And maybe we'll talk about if we have regrets or not with that in a little bit.
Yeah. And so it's going to be interesting for us because the flight to Santiago from Mexico City was 8 hours, right? So,
yeah, 8 hours.
So it's kind of like a ocean crossing flight time wise. But this was the first time we were doing kind of a longer flight during the day. So we left Querétaro really early morning, really quick flight to Mexico City. And then we were going to be kind of like 10 a.m. to 8 p.m. kind of thing on the flight.
Yeah, for sure. It was definitely a long flight during the day. And if you've listened to some of our stuff about traveling with a baby, traveling with a toddler, we talked pretty in depth about Japan, and we were obviously very anxious for those flights. But flying overnight, especially like with a small child, like she slept, a good portion of the trip. But I was like, well, she only sleeps like 2, maybe 3 hours of daytime sleep now because she's bigger. So we need to be like super prepared. I think one of the things that maybe was helpful with the trip and with the time zone. So Argentina is 3 hours, Argentina and Chile are 3 hours ahead of Mexico. So I guess that's 2 hours ahead of Eastern Standard Time. And so we were going through a pretty significant time change, but here in Mexico, because our I think our first flight was like 6 a.m. or something like that. We ended up getting up at like 3. I think we got up at 3. Lou got up at 3:30, and then we left for the airport pretty quick after she got up. And because of that, she was pretty snoozy in the morning. Like, I think by the time we kind of got on our first flight, she was pretty chill. She was like, had a little snooze, I think, on that plane ride. And then she played a little bit in Mexico City. And then we got on the plane for our big one, and we were able to do some activities and play with her a little bit before she took like a pretty significant nap, woke up, and then I think maybe she slept a little bit more. So we actually got more kind of, I guess, sleep than I was sort of planning for, because we had gotten her up so early in the morning. Like, I think she lost out on probably like 4 hours of her normal nighttime sleep. And so she was tired, which I'm not saying tired child's a good thing, but when you're traveling and you've got this natural sort of rocking motion and natural white noise, I think it works out pretty well. So I wanted to talk about a little bit how we prepared for this flight, because there was a little bit of like, eek, this is a long flight to entertain a toddler. And also, this is the first long haul flight that she was walking for, which when you are traveling with a child that's walking, it's a bit of a game changer. Like, I feel like it switches once they start crawling, and then once they start pulling themselves up and kind of toddling from place to place, which is what she was doing with Japan, it changes again. But then walking is like a whole thing, because she can get herself up and down the seat. She can just take off. She can just go running if she wants to. Like, she's pretty independent now. And so I guess let's talk a little bit about some of the things that we did to prepare for this flight.
Yeah, so one of the kind of new things we did for this flight was we got her a little travel backpack, and so she was able to put some of her favorite toys in it and carry it and kind of be responsible for that herself. And it was cool this trip as well, because she's walking so confidently, so she was actually able to board and get off the planes walking. Not all of them, but most of them she did walk on and walk off of the planes. And then we kind of have some like tried and true staples, like the things that stick to the window and spin, and then like the iPad as the emergency break glass in case of an emergency entertainment option.
Yeah, and one of the notes I made with that is YouTube Premium. So if you have a Netflix account, then you can download shows offline on an iPad, which is really helpful. I think that there's probably parents out there with bigger kids who have really good like games and programs and stuff when they're more independent. She's still not super independent with her device, or with the device, it's ours. So we actually splurge for YouTube Premium, which is shockingly expensive. I'm just going to throw it out there. I don't think it's worth it to have all the time. But you can download things like, Miss Rachel, for those of you with small kids, and we also have a Spanish equivalent to Miss Rachel. So just downloading like a couple of little 30-minute episodes. I don't think we use them. I think a little bit maybe during like meal times or times where we just needed a little break from entertaining. But like Ryan said, we had her backpack, which was really fun. So she was able to, pack the toys she wanted. And then she was able to like choose from the backpack which toys she wanted to play with and when. It is a pretty small backpack, so I did pack her some other stuff separately. So we did do reusable sticker books. That was a really, really fun toy that she loved. So I think if you've got a kid kind of between 18 months and I would say, I don't know when she's going to get bored of this, but we had our friend's kid over the other day who is almost 3, and he had a great time with one of her sticker books. So 18 months plus, the reusable sticker books are super fun. I bought 3 of them for her, and none of them she'd used before. So we were able to kind of make our way through one at a time. She is able to take the stickers off herself, but sometimes she asks for help, and then she can move them around and stuff and just play a bit independently, which is great. We also, of course, had books for her, like tons of books. We always have books. Like you said, the stick on to the window are always great. You can like stick those on, and then they'll just like play with them for ages. And then we also had snacks. I feel like snacks are just super key. And when we did our episode on traveling with 0 to 12 months, I feel like that's really one of the things that changes when they stop relying on milk is like snacks are super, super key. So I think I packed snacks for us as well, But Lou's snack bag was like way bigger than like, or like maybe the same size as our combined snack bags, which is crazy because she'll just be like snack, 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 snack. So just kind of as we got on the plane, letting her discover her space, and she really likes to play with the barf bag and the safety card, and she likes to look out the window as we're doing things. And then we like give her the backpack. She starts playing with that, kind of let her do her thing. And then we only use the iPad when she got kind of like, she did have a moment, I think maybe before she napped or maybe when she woke up and she had a lot of energy where she really wanted to run around. And so after we had done sufficient running in the airplane, we were like, okay, let's just have a little bit of TV time so we can just take a little break. But
yeah, and she did end up, there was a panda documentary on Aeromexico that we watched, and she just kept yelling, panda, panda, panda.
Yeah, she's very into pandas.
For a long time. But yeah, something that was cool about the flight is we got seats right at the front of our section. So by the area, by the washrooms, which are kind of seats where you're like, I don't really want to be by the washroom. But it was nice because you could just get up and there was like a walkway in between the two aisles because it was a Dreamliner. So 3 seats, 3 seats, 3 seats in the main body of the plane. And then she could just kind of like walk around in there. And so we spent a decent amount of time doing that. It was weird because it was a newer Dreamliner. And so they do the thing where they like turn all the windows to night, even though it was during the day, which I was finding kind of
disorienting.
Yeah. I was like, my eyes hurt from all the bright lights from all the screens because everyone's watching TV because it's daytime. But they've made it seem like it's dark in there.
Yeah, I do feel like the pro of that is that I do feel like I said before, she did sleep a little more than maybe I would have expected her to. She doesn't normally take like super, super long naps on planes. That hasn't been like, she's more of like a snoozer on planes versus at home. She takes like one really solid nap and she slept pretty solidly. So I'll say that it being dark was a win overall since she's like too little for an eye mask and stuff like that. But yeah, it was very disorienting. Even when I think back to it, I'm like, did we travel at night? Because everything was dark and then you go to the bathroom and it's like the window in the bathroom is like the one window where you can see out and you're like, oh, right. It's like 2 p.m. right now and it's like bright outside.
Yeah, but it was honestly like a not bad. I kind of enjoyed that like time frame on the plane. Like, it's so much nicer than like, I feel like in my mind, I'm kind of like, well, 8 hours, 13 hours, is there really that much of a difference? And it's like, you can definitely feel the extra 5-6 hours to go to Asia versus to going to Santiago in this case. I think it's like 2 hours more to go to Argentina, 1-2 hours. But yeah, overall, pretty smooth flying. And I think one thing I'm excited about the next time we kind of have a big flight day, Lou seems to be engaging so much more with her books over the past 2 months. And so I'm hopeful that like she'll be able to be entertained with books on the next flight.
Yeah, for sure. And I think one thing that's like, I mean, it's really just fun to watch her development in general, but I feel like one thing that's really fun about this stage of development, you know, she's almost 2, she's like starting to become more independent with her play. So her play up until now, what she has done for play has been very much like she's needed kind of somebody to play with her or to like instigate the play, I guess. And now she's really great about like, hey, we're both in the kitchen. She doesn't want to be in the kitchen. She just goes to her play area and grabs a book, sits on the couch and is like, blah, 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 like telling herself a little story. Or she like goes and just plays with her toys. It's not long periods of time that she's doing it for because she's still little, but we're starting to get more of that, which I'm excited to see how that translates onto flights. And like, especially as she gets her own seat in her own space, she'll start kind of finding, you know, the things that she likes to do on a travel day, which I think will be really cool. I know we're a little ways off from that, but I think it'll be pretty cool. But yeah, she was amazing. She did great. The day was pretty long. Like I said, we left our house at like 3:30 in the morning. We got to the Santiago airport at like 8 or 9 p.m. And then one of the things that I think we hadn't really thought through when we first booked the flight was that Chile has pretty intense like immigration and customs. And so obviously every country has immigration and customs that you have to go through, but Chile is like very strict on like fruits and vegetables and foods and all these things. And so while it was pretty, I would say speedy and smooth overall, there wasn't a lot of people in the airport when we went and stuff. It just like takes a little bit of time because you have to go through that entire process, and they screen everyone's bags and all that type of stuff. And so by the time we like got out of the airport and got a taxi to our hotel, which was only like 5 minutes away, and checked in, I feel like it was like what?
I think it was at least 2 hours.
It must have been
3
11
before we
p.m.
got to our hotel room. Yeah. It was about 2 from landing in the plane to getting our bags. And it was one of those things too where you had to go through go through immigration, wait a really long time for the bags to come, get your bag, and then get through like a screening where they're like, do you have apples in there? Which is definitely, as a traveler, one of those things that makes you annoyed. And then, yeah, we kind of, I feel like on this trip down to Bariloche had a couple not mistakes really, but like just things that travel lessons that probably should have learned by now. So in Santiago, one was just kind of assuming that the hotel shuttles would be like
available
there, and not that you had to like check with the hotel and it was like, oh, we sent someone to get you. And the other one was our flight into Bariloche had been changed time-wise, so we were going to be arriving a couple hours later, which led to our rental car being canceled.
Yeah, which maybe we can talk about that when we get there. But yeah, I feel like it was like, yeah, we booked with, who were we staying with? Holiday.
I think it was the Hilton Garden Inn.
Oh yeah, Hilton Garden Inn. So through our Amex, we're like Hilton Gold members. That gives us free breakfast. So we're like, let's do the Hilton Garden Inn at the airport. It's really close. Says they have a shuttle. I never contacted them. We get there, nobody knows where it is. And then it turns out it runs like once on the hour. And I think it was like 10:30 or 10:25 or something. So then we're like, okay, well, we don't have any cell phone data. We don't have any Chilean cash, like just 2 misses by us. And so we're like, we just got to pay for a cab. The first one quotes us like this insanely high rate for like a 5-minute drive. I think it was gonna be like $50. I was like, let's find a cheaper one. So we found one that was maybe half the price, still outrageous for how far we were going. But we're like, whatever, it's late, like Lou's tired, we're tired. We just need to like get to this hotel. And so, yeah, then we like asked when we got there and they're like, yeah, we just run like every hour on the hour. And so we were like, okay, let's book it for tomorrow morning. Let's not pay for another cab. Let's just make this happen. And then the other mistake we made, so the day before we left, thankfully, you looked this up, you realized that Chile and Argentina have different plugins than we do in Mexico. Mexico is the same as Canada and the US. And you ordered like just like Uber, Rapid, quickly, like some converters. So the converter works, Ryan plugs it in and then plugs in something else. It like sparks and like causes like an outage of like shorts the circuit basically. And we're like, oh crap. And so thankfully the hotel had like converters. It must be a common thing that people just don't think about this or don't bring them or whatever. Chile's is very strange. And so we were able to borrow them. But I was like, man, it's like we've never traveled before. Like we just had a couple misses with that. And maybe that's like us just being like I had like the perfect setup of snacks and perfect organization of Lou's outfits and extra outfits and like, you know, diapers and all those things. So maybe it was just like that was the focus. And then we just kind of forgot like basic things like, will our cell phones work in Chile? And like, should I contact the hotel beforehand? And yeah, all these things. So it was like a little bit of I think a little bit stressful when we got there.
Yeah, for sure. And yeah, we turned around, spent a quick night in Santiago. We're back at the airport relatively early the next morning, and then flew Santiago to the older airport in Buenos Aires. There's one that's far away from the city. It's called EZE, and it's like the most common and biggest one. And there's AEP, which is Aeroparque, and we were going through Aeroparque. And one of the kind of really nice things about Chile and Argentina that we didn't know about that we found out when we were there is they really do a lot to make it easy to travel as parents. So basically all the airports have separate check-in counters, separate security lines, and separate customs and immigrations for priority passengers, for like disabled passengers, parents, pregnant women, anything like that. So parents with kids under 6 count in like all of those priority lines, which was really, really nice for the entire thing. And honestly, it's like when you leave that, you're just like, We need to move somewhere where this is the case.
Yeah, we got back to Mexico. Mexico City was just a complete and utter
Flustercook.
Yeah, it was not good, which we can talk about that another time because it's many weeks in the future from where we are in the story right now. But it was crazy. And I was like, I'm really missing this family priority. But it was really nice because we got to the Santiago airport and the like Pan American Games were finishing up. And so it was just like athletes from every country, everywhere. Argentinian Airlines is like super busy. So there's just like this huge, massive line. And like we did have enough time. We'd budgeted plenty of time. So it's not like we were rushed or anything. But part of the reason that a lot of places give families privilege to have a separate line or to go first is because it's really hard to occupy a running toddler while you're waiting in a very slow line. So if we're moving, she's okay in her stroller. If we're just like stop and go, she wants out. And then she doesn't just want to stand there. She wants to like explore, which is not super ideal when you're in a line. So we were kind of doing our best through the line with snacks and toys and stuff. And then like one of the people who was working with the airline actually pulled us ahead, which was we were really, really grateful. And then the Santiago airport was chill. It was nice. Everything was good. Then we got to Buenos Aires and we had to go through customs and immigration again. So I feel like this is where kind of when you think about like, you know, the taxi and the night in the hotel and like just having to do customs and immigration 2 days back to back, I was like, maybe we should have just gone right to Buenos Aires and then stayed there and then gone to Bariloche. But anyways, c'est la vie. Just something to consider based on you and your trip planning if you're considering this.
And one thing in Chile, you don't have to go through customs if you're on a connecting flight, but because we booked 2 separate flights.
Yeah.
So that was another thing.
Yeah, in and out, we booked 2 separate flights. So yeah, then we got into Argentina and we had to do all of that over again. And it was kind of weird. We were like, so where's like domestic now? And we had to actually like walk out of the airport, even though we had a flight. We'd booked 1 set of flights from Santiago through to Bariloche. We still had to like get our bags, go through customs, go through immigration, walk outside the airport, go into like a separate area of the airport, recheck our bags. So we get into domestic and it's like an absolute crazy madhouse. It was like a Saturday. We found out it was a long weekend, which we didn't know about. And we were like, oh my God, this is actually insane. And then somebody was like, oh, you have a kid, you can just go in like the priority lineup. And I was like, oh, thank all the gods of the world. And so it was actually pretty smooth. So yeah, then we arrived to Bariloche and like Ryan said before, our flight had been changed and I had not updated budget who we were renting our car through. And he's like, oh, you were supposed to be here like 4 hours ago. It's marked as a no-show. And I'm like, crap, we needed a car seat and we can't drive a manual car. You know, can we still get a car? And he's like, yeah, I think I've got something similar. And thankfully it didn't cost us much more to do that, but definitely a good learning experience. So if you have a rental car and your flight gets changed, update your rental car company. Maybe that's like common knowledge, but it's not something I thought about.
Yeah. And so, yeah, we got into Bariloche. We got our car sorted. Felt like it had been a very long travel session to get there, but we got there and the day was beautiful. Got in the car and headed off to our Airbnb. The Bariloche airport's relatively close and it's a decent sized airport actually. Like when we came back and we're in the other area, I was like, oh, it's like big, más o menos.
For like how small Bariloche is, I think the airport is a surprising size for sure.
And you can fly internationally there, I think, from Santiago every month about November, and Sao Paulo, and then a few other cities in Argentina fly directly there. So that was one of the considerations of maybe making Santiago more worth it was there was a discount flight direct from Santiago, which is actually a shorter flight than it is from Buenos Aires because Bariloche is really close to Chile. And I think that might have made us think like if we'd taken that flight, I think I would have been like, okay, I think it was worth it to do the Chile thing.
Yeah, because I think customs and immigration in Bariloche would have been much different than going through Buenos Aires.
Yeah, and having to then go recheck in and da-da-da-da-da. And the airport was it probably ended up taking like 4 or 5 hours more because we flew to go through security twice, fly to BA, fly down. Anyways.
Yeah. But I think overall, like considering we flew Querétaro, Mexico City, Santiago, stayed overnight in Santiago, then had flights from Santiago to BA to Bariloche. The fact that like everything was like on time, smooth, no luggage was lost, nobody lost a limb, like nobody yelled. Like it was overall, it was like pretty smooth. It was long, it was tiring. We were very tired by the time we got to Bariloche, but like everything went really well. Like Lou did amazing considering it was basically 2 full days of travel by the time we actually got to Bariloche.
Yeah, and there was a couple of things like, so the woman pulls us out of the big line and checks us in early. Someone did the same when we had gotten to Argentina.
We were like waiting
customs.
to like board. Oh yeah, I was gonna say we were waiting to board a flight. They were like, pasa.
The guy at the rental car company was really awesome and helped us out when I could have easily seen him trying to like kind of take advantage of the situation to charge us a lot more money. So yeah, lots of really things that made the day really smooth. And I think too, I mean, it's so nice as a parent having that with the way they have stuff set up there in Argentina and Chile. I remember thinking too, like, this must be so frustrating for Chilean and Argentinian parents when they go anywhere else in the world and people are like, you have kids, don't care, get in the back of the line, losers.
Yeah, I mean, it seems like other countries are maybe starting to follow suit. Like we talked about,
Canada's
started to do it, which is really nice. I feel like I wonder about other people if they're like, oh, like F these families. But I actually feel like if you're somebody who maybe doesn't want to be like, have your travel day maybe quote unquote spoiled by small children, I feel like it'd be like great to just have families and kids kind of separate, right?
I mean, especially too with like security where like it takes just a long time to get through security when you've got to collapse the stroller, hold the kid,
Mm-hmm.
But yeah, anyway, so yeah, relatively smooth travels. I think looking back on it now, given how everything played out, we would have just like, hey, it's worth it to just fly direct to BA and save the time and everything else involved. Yeah, what else do you want to cover for now in this episode?
Yeah, so we're going to do, just so you guys know, we're going to do a full like Bariloche episode. We'll have to talk about if we're doing Bariloche and BA or if we're doing them as 2 separate ones. I'm not sure yet. But I thought maybe we could just talk about like finally getting to Bariloche after this epic travels and just maybe first impressions that first day/night.
Yeah, so first impressions were amazing. I remember I don't think we paid attention to the weather on the day we were traveling there. We'd kind of been following it leading up to, and the weather was like 5 degrees, 6 degrees. Cool. And then we were on the plane and like the pilot does the announcement like, today it's whatever degrees in the city. And he was like, 18 degrees and sunny in Bariloche. And we like looked at each other. We're like, ooh. And so beautiful first impression of Bariloche. Driving in, it's like 30 minutes to the Airbnb. And one of the things we were really excited about with this time is we kind of invested in an Airbnb that was right by the lake and had a beautiful view. So getting in, we had a really welcoming host who kind of talked us through everything. And I think I felt just like super excited to be there.
Yeah, for sure. Like, so Bariloche is surrounded by mountains and it's right on this like beautiful lake with mountains. And because we were in kind of early springtime, the mountains were still snow-capped, which is so beautiful. It's just like very, 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 very picturesque. And like Ryan said, we arrived with really great weather. We had a great host. Our Airbnb was really beautiful. We had this big window looking out into the lake. And I think we were just like, oh, this is amazing. And then our Airbnb host had given us some great recommendations for some food. So we headed into town and we had a really like good first meal there. And I think we were just really excited. I think the only thing is I had started to feel sick. My ears were really bothering me from the day of travel and I was really tired. Sort of felt like I was maybe getting a cold, but we'll talk about that a little later on. I think we were still just very excited to like explore the plaza and see what we remembered and just be walking in like the fresh mountain air. And yeah, everything was just great. We were super happy to be there. And so,
yeah, and we went for dinner at a brewery called Manouche, which we would kind of end up going back to a whole bunch of times, but had like a good pot pie. I think I had a burger.
Yeah, I had like a chicken pot pie for because my My ear was doing that like weird pain where it like kind of hurts into your throat, but you're not sure if you have like an earache or a sore throat. So anyways, I was like, just wanted something kind of warm and nourishing. I was craving kind of soup, something I didn't have to chew. And then they had this amazing pot pie on the menu. It was like a dream come true. So would definitely recommend Manouche. That pot pie is worth it.
For sure. Yeah. And then, so we'll dive deeper on Bariloche, but I think our general impression was like really solid travel day. I definitely think as well. So they don't do daylight savings time in Argentina. So it's currently 3 hours ahead of Central Time. It's not a huge time change. But yeah, despite being a long flight, I think we got there, felt pretty good, didn't feel like too jet lagged or anything. And then from like a nomad perspective, I was actually pretty like happy to be 2 hours ahead of Eastern Time and just like work on that time zone. I found it quite enjoyable.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, for sure. Maybe we can dive into more of like kind of what our routine became like in Bariloche. But yeah, I was a bit anxious. Like 3 hours it's not like going to Europe or to Asia, but it's significant enough to like mess with your rhythms. And so we were a little uncertain of how Lou would manage and if she was going to wake up at like 4 a.m. and stuff. But she honestly like did really amazing. Like, I think we were all pretty tired. So we just kind of had, normal bedtime when we got there, and next day just started kick things off and got into our kind of new rhythm and routine for the next 3 weeks.
Yeah. And I guess one other first impression thing for me, I think as we prepared and we're getting ready, following the news from Argentina and just the, inflation and the value of their peso getting worse and worse and worse. And there was a gasoline issue in the weeks leading up. They were also in the middle of kind of election season. So that was all going on. So I think it created this feeling of us of like, well, we've been here before. We have that. And we have friends who have been here recently, but like, what's it going to be like? Like, you hear crimes getting worse as people are kind of in bad economic spots, but we're like kind of not really sure like what to expect. And I think one of the things that was remarkable about it was just how normal everything was. Everything's open, lots of people around, everybody's happy.
I'm sure everyone's not happy, but the general vibe was...
If you were like, hey, we'll show you a picture of like a place in Mexico and then show you a picture of a couple of different places in Argentina that we visited, and we're like, which one of these is going through like an economic crisis? You'd be like, it's the Mexican city, not the Argentinian city.
Yeah, I think it's just hard when you're not there. You just don't know like what things are actually like. So you're just relying on like word of mouth and Facebook groups and, what people are saying and stuff. And so, this is something that we worried less about pre-traveling with a child. But when you're traveling with a small child, it's like we don't want to get in a situation that could be dangerous. And we weren't really sure how things were going to go with the election and, is there unrest or anything? And everything was very, very smooth. I mean, we'll talk more about just being in Bariloche, being in BA again, but I feel like everything was just really great. And I think if you were completely oblivious to what was going on, you would never guess it.
Yeah. So yeah, that was the adventure to Bariloche. We'll talk more about everything there. If you have or are planning a trip in the next couple weeks or months to Argentina and have specific questions about it, definitely fire them our way. We can include that in our episode and probably just get back to you directly. And other than that, anything we want to touch on before we wrap up?
No, I think we've got so much to talk about in the next episode, so stay tuned for that. It'll definitely be a jam-packed episode with everything, all things Bariloche.
Awesome. Until next time.
Bye, guys.
Thanks for listening to this episode. If you want more, make sure to check out The World Wanders Insider, available on Patreon at patreon.com/theworldwanderers.
For show notes, head over to theworldwanderers.com. Find us on social media at The World Wanderers Podcast and join the private Facebook community at World Wanderers, a community for travelers.
You can always get in touch with us at info@theworldwanderers.com. And if you enjoyed the show, don't forget to subscribe and leave a review. It really helps us find new listeners.
See you next time.